Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you, featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
Are you a business owner tired of paying exorbitant credit card fees? Call now to get an evaluation. If we cannot beat your current prices, you receive a $250 credit card. Call 818-583-7328 for more information. I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. My guest today is Sara Alijewicz, and Sara has been on my show before, and she was an interesting guest because she's running for an office, which is office of a judge in Delray Beach, Florida. Now, most people don't understand the importance of what a judge does and the kinds of things that they have control over that can be very, very instrumental in making the lives of people who commit crimes or have marital issues or whatever very, very part of the system of politics. It's a very interesting job, and she's going to explain to you today what it's all about. But let me give you just a little sample of what she has done over the 20 years of courtroom experience. She's included marital and family, juvenile dependency, domestic violence, small claims, misdemeanors, guardianship and probate, and mental health cases. Now, that's a lot of work, Sara. So what I want you to do from the beginning, even though you explained it in the last show that we did together, what is the role of a judge?
The role of the judge is to settle disputes and apply the law in settling the disputes between the parties. Sometimes the parties are individuals, and sometimes they're corporations. Sometimes they can be credit card companies versus people who owe them money. So the types of things that judges preside over vary very vastly from case to case, and that's what makes the job difficult.
Well, Sara, most people don't really understand the role of a judge, and they don't even vote for judges. What would you say to that?
Well, it's very important for people to become educated and vote for judges because there's really no one else in the system of government who can take your home away, for example, put you in prison, potentially take your children away. So people's civil and property rights depend on them being educated about the judiciary.
Yeah. You know, I know this is a federal situation that I'm going to discuss for a moment because it's right there. It's out in the public, and every single show on television talks about it, and that's the Kavanaugh case. Now, I'm just curious what your feelings about that is, and what would you do in that particular case?
Because the judicial canons prohibit judicial officers and even candidates for judicial office in the state of Florida from commenting on those kind of issues, I really can't give an opinion one way or another. I know it is on the news everywhere, and everybody does have an opinion, but I'm really prohibited from saying anything about that particular
I understand
issue.
that. And now I'm going to get into a lot of different issues. So, generally, do you want to explain to the audience the primary and how you were able to win and not go to the general election on November 8th?
Well, the primary, there were 5 judicial races, as you know, and I was fortunate enough to have won the 52% so that I do not have to go to the general election runoff in November. Wish I could tell you for sure how in any election you win. I just know that it's a lot of work. You have to speak to everybody. You have to try to get people to vote for you, obviously, and I just spent a lot of time speaking to the public and going to everywhere I could think of where I could actually reach the voters because, as you said, people don't know judicial candidates. So without information, a lot of times people just don't vote for judges, as that's demonstrated by the voter turnout, comparatively speaking, in the other elections, such as the governor primary and the other races. The voter turnout's heavier in those races, and then you get further down the ballot, people don't tend to vote for the judicial candidates.
All right, so I want to imagine you standing up in front of a group, and I'd love to have the audience listen to some of the things that you tell them. So would you just give us an idea, if you were in front of a group today, and some of the things that are very important to you that you would discuss with the people who are listening?
Well, most people really do want to know a little bit about your personal information. So generally speaking, I would tell them how long I'd lived where I live, how long I've practiced law, and then I would speak about my professional qualifications and how long I practiced law and what type of areas of practice I covered. And like you said, I had a pretty varied background in types of cases I had handled. And so generally you have only about 2 minutes to speak to people, so you try to mash all that information in a coherent manner within 2 minutes. I did find it interesting that people do want to know about you personally, because obviously when you get up there and talk about your professional qualifications, everybody that runs for judge is a lawyer, so everybody presumes you know the law, and they want to know a little bit about your background and what brings you to the bench.
Well, give us an indication of what is your background and how you decided to become a lawyer, because it's not easy, and you have a family, and it was probably something that you were maybe passionate about. But let's explain to everybody a little more about you.
Well, I did want to be a lawyer from the time I was in high school, but like everybody else, you take a circuitous route to your profession. I was paying for my own education, so I became a medical technologist out of college so that I could be assured that I would have a job and not have huge student loan debt for graduate school. After about 10 years, my husband and I, we already had kids. We made the decision that I would go back to law school because we had settled in pretty comfortably here in Florida and we're raising our kids. And so I came to law as a second career at Nova Southeastern, and kept in the back of my mind that I just was going to do the best thing for my family and the best thing to serve the public that I could do. And then I was fortunate that I got a job at the Legal Aid Society, where I did get the opportunity to practice very, very diverse areas of law and represent the public of Palm Beach County. So I was always always have been committed to the public, so that's what brought me to the decision to become a judge, because it's very important to have judges that are committed to serving the public.
Yeah. Television romanticizes a lot of the judges. They make them into these very, very interesting cases. Now, did you have a specific case that you worked on that you said, I need to share this with my audience. I need to let people know what's going on out there. So is there a particular case that you can tell our audience about?
I found the cases that were the most important in practicing law were cases that impacted children. I worked for Legal Aid, a program called the Foster Children's Project, where the attorneys were actually attorneys representing the children's legal interests to try to get them out of foster care as soon as possible. And a lot of the cases I had there were probably the most important cases that I handled, because children, one way or another, they need to get out of foster care, whether it's to get home to their parents, whether it's to get to a stable relative to take care of them, or to be adopted out of the foster care system. I think those cases were the most important and had the biggest impact on me personally and professionally.
What's wrong with our society that we have so many people who are having children out of wedlock and therefore they can't take care of them and they can't support them, so they send them to foster homes? What is your thoughts about that? Because it seems to me that when I listen to a lot of people talking about what's happening to kids, it's really kind of terrible, actually.
I think that substance abuse issues have a big impact on the issues that bring children into foster care, and also to issues of domestic violence. I think alcohol and substance abuse and all those issues are, as society, probably the things that negatively impact children and families the most.
Has that grown?
Because that impacts people's ability to hold down jobs and get stable homes.
Yeah. Has it grown? Has it become more and more difficult for the system to take care of these kids? And also, when I say has it grown, I'm talking about the alcoholism and the drug addiction problem. From your standpoint, do you see a rise in that?
I think that I think it gets reported and people are more aware of it. I think it's always been a problem for the last, 20, since the 80s. I think it's been a very significant problem. I think the issue has been cyclical in terms of whether it's, prescribed drugs or street drugs or whatever the case might be. But I think that really is cyclical in nature, but I don't really think that it's been on the rise. I think it's gotten more publicity and people are more aware of it than ever before.
Sarah, somebody comes up to your court. Say it's a person who is, for all intents and purposes, pretty young, like 18 years old, and this person has a drug addiction problem and they're pregnant. And they're standing before you and you're trying to decide what to do about them. Set the stage for us. How does it all start?
So usually those kind of cases would come before the court under the procedure called the Marksman Act, which means that a relative or a person with knowledge has determined the person has a substance abuse problem, and so they would file something with the court and bring that person, that like you said, a pregnant woman before the court, and that does happen. In most cases, if a woman is pregnant, unless their addiction is completely out of control, they do want treatment. So on many of those occasions, the woman will agree to go to treatment, and there are a couple of specific agencies in this county that will help pregnant women because that is a special circumstance, obviously, in terms of medically detoxing them off whatever it is they're on. Occasionally, a real hardcore person that long history of substance abuse will resist in spite of the fact that they're pregnant. So then it becomes more contentious, and you have to have hearings, and they could potentially be held in contempt for not getting treatment. But generally speaking, people, if they're not really entrenched in their addiction, they will voluntarily submit to treatment, but there is a procedure in place for a person to be forcibly ordered to go to treatment for substance abuse.
Now, you have two sides to yourself, which everybody does. One side of yourself is just your personal self and all of your ethics and your morals and your thoughts about how you take care of different things. And then there's the other side, which is the professional side. Now, when you're in court, I would imagine, and I'm just asking you about this, does your personal attitude toward these kinds of horrendous situations that you see just come to play, or do you just turn that off and you become the professional judge that you are?
Lately, in the news and in general public, you hear people using the word empathy a lot, and that's what you have to do when you're in that position. You have to put yourself not in the place of the person, but you have to not sympathize, but you have to empathize about what brought that person there. So it's kind of a personality trait that you have to be able to do that. You have to be able to separate whatever your personal beliefs are and just apply the law to what's sitting before you. It doesn't mean you have to feel sorry for people, but you have to be able to just take the person as you find them and rule according to the law. I think that's probably the hardest part, that most people don't realize how hard it is until they are put in the situation of being a judicial officer, because I don't think it's something that everybody can do.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. Now, do you work hand in hand with the law? I'm talking about policemen, I'm talking about the FBI, I'm talking about the CIA, any one of these different agencies that deal with some very serious issues. Do you work together, and how does that work?
The judges and agencies don't work together in terms of finding facts together, but they do work together in that they have special groups set aside. For example, right now there's a lot of human trafficking that's on the rise with young women and young men, and so the judicial side and law enforcement side set up committees to try to best figure out how to deal with the issues, and the same with drug task force. They set up task force and so forth, where the judicial side is able to work with community agencies, law enforcement, and all the people who they call stakeholders to try to address problems. But judicial officers don't act like fact finders or make determinations about how law enforcement is going to do their job.
Wow, this is very interesting. Human trafficking is on the rise, and here in a small town like Delray Beach, you see things like that?
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
yes. Actually, in a Marksman Act case, there was a woman who was being human trafficked, and her sister had been trying to find her for a year, and tracked her down to a house in Delray Beach where she was being trafficked out of that house, and people were arrested. So
Wow.
it does happen.
So when that came up, and you saw that, how did you feel about that?
I felt really sorry for her sister, but because she was so frustrated, because her sister wasn't a child, her sister was an adult.
Right.
So there wasn't much she could do because her sister had all these issues. Even though she was being trafficked, when there's an adult involved, it was really difficult. So I felt sorry for her sister. Ultimately, obviously, it turned out favorably, so that was good.
Yeah, I'm sure that was, yeah. Wow. Again, I'm thinking about that. I think here in small towns like Delray Beach, Florida, you say to yourself, do these kinds of things happen? And as it appears, they do. Is there some new laws that have set in that you could work with? I don't mean to avoid the issues, but things that make it easier for you to deal with.
The laws are always changing to try to make the procedures work more seamlessly. The Marksman Act statute was revamped a couple years ago to try to make it a little more timely. So things evolve and change. Mm-hmm. But the judicial side really doesn't have much to do with that. That's up to the legislators. So the issues have to become known to the people who work on the legislative side, and they do, ask for input. They write proposed legislation, and there's a period of time where people can comment on it, and generally speaking, people do comment in writing about parts that they think are good or bad, but the judicial side really just kind of has to deal with the laws and the cases and hope that the problems become recognized if there needs to be something changed minimally so that the procedures and the laws work a little better.
Yeah,
so it's a slow-moving train.
Yeah, like everything. Unfortunately, it is a slow-moving train, and I'm sure that things will improve. Now, let's get to something else, which is very sort of really part of the Delray Beach situation, and that is the judicial seats that are remaining. For those people in Florida who live here, what do they have to know about the seats that are remaining, and what do they do about it?
Okay, first of all, it's not just Delray. They're all county-wide. So everybody in Palm Beach County, no matter where they live, whether it's Jupiter, Belglade, Delray, Boca, everybody gets to vote for the judges, which is different than your congressional seats, where obviously you have a specific congressman or you have a mayor in your city. So everybody gets to vote for the judicial officers. And there's three circuit, which are judges who hear claims over $15,000, family law, domestic matters, felonies, basically the major crimes, and also the kind of things like probate and guardianship. And there's one county court race left that is also the other race that I was not in, which is you hear things under $15,000 and misdemeanors. Right. And I think it's important for everybody to be educated when voting for these officers, and there's a lot of information out there. The Florida Bar has a voluntary self-disclosure that judicial candidates are encouraged to do, that they fill out, and it gives a lot of information about their qualifications, like how many trials they've done in their career, how often they've appeared in court, information like that. There's also something called vote411.org that is on the Internet that breaks down not only judicial elections, but it can tell a voter by their address everything that's going to be on their ballot. And it gives you background, self-disclosure, but it gives you background information on every candidate, on every race. And I think it also even gives some information about some of the constitutional amendments that are going to be on the ballot. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a long ballot. So it's really important that voters get themselves educated before they decide to cast their ballot and do their best to check out what each candidate has done in their career, because I think that's the most important thing is people's qualifications and their background.
You know, Sarah, if you were to stand before a high school group because, I mean, you can't vote until you're 21 years old, but the reality is that some of the people in high schools need to know more, because when they go to vote, when they're 21, you want them to be more educated. So, again, put yourself in a high school class, a civics class, for example.
Actually, they can vote at 18, and they can register to vote at 16, even though they can't vote till 18. So I first of all would encourage them to vote, to register to vote. If I was standing in front of a high school class, tell them to register to vote. And likewise, I think the young people are more internet savvy, and so I would just encourage them to use their ability to research each candidate individually and not rely on what is self-disclosed by the candidate, because Google is a wealth of knowledge. So that's what I would encourage them to do, is to do their own independent research into each candidate for every office, and not just rely on what is self-disclosed by the candidate.
Yeah, that was my mistake as I was thinking about the drinking laws.
You were thinking of drinking age.
Rather than voting. I was thinking about the drinking. But, okay. Now, you mentioned some of the things that you're interested in our audience knowing about, how people prepare when they're just ready to vote. But you know, today there's so many things going on in the lives of young people. How do we motivate them? What's your opinion? You have kids, and I'm sure because of the position that you're in, you talk to your kids about the law. But the average kid, I want to know how to motivate the average kid.
I believe the best thing you can do is set a good example. My parents voted in every election. I vote in every election. My kids vote in every election. I think if you pattern, you let your kids know it's important, or there's an adult in a child's life to let them know it's important to vote, I think that's the best way to get a young adult to vote. I know that there's a lot of school activity now to try to bring out the young vote, and it's very important because young people still don't really vote, in big numbers, as everyone knows. And I think it's important that they know that it's easy to vote. You don't have to vote on Election Day. You can early vote. You can absentee ballot vote if you live in college. If, say, you're in Tallahassee and you live in Boca Raton. Florida has tried to make it as easy as possible so that people can vote and they don't have to just be pinned down to the November 6th. Election Day.
I know we're talking, because you're in Florida, I'm in Florida, and we're talking all about the laws and all about how to motivate kids in Florida. But I think because my show is all over the country and all over the world, there are certain issues that I think that are part of every single place in this nation that is part of the whole notion of voting. I want to talk about that because while we understand a little bit about some of the interesting things that you've done and the things that you want to tell people, it is so important for us to discuss the whole notion of why it is important to vote and get out the word that you have the power, which, it empowers you to be able to have a say in matters, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's the old saying, if you don't vote, don't complain. Because if you don't vote, put your skin in the game. I'm trying to think of the right thing to say. You have to take a position one way or another, because otherwise you just can't walk around and complain about, I feel like I went to college and I'm living with my parents. What's going on in the world? You need to do something about it proactively and take charge of it and vote. I mean,
sure,
it's frustrating. I can't even really verbalize it. It's really, during early voting, the candidates spent a lot of time at the early voting sites, and at least once a day we would comment to each other that we didn't see any young people.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that you're making that statement, because this show is dedicated to making things move ahead, to making things more important, to creating a situation where change can be for the better. But last but not least, What I want to know is that it's getting very close. November is getting very close. So, of course, you know that I love to have my guests, kind of end on a note that they think is really important. So give us a statement, and I'm going to push for this particular show to be heard by young people. So what do you want to say to them? And we'll close on that.
The most important thing you can do wherever you live, November 6th is coming up, however it works, wherever you live, make sure that you vote. It's our biggest, most important constitutional right in this country. And if you don't use the right, who's to say we couldn't lose such a right, or it could be pared back? So I would just encourage everybody, no matter what, you don't have to vote for on every issue on a ballot, but there has to be something on a ballot that is of interest to you. So look at your individual place where you live. Read what's on the ballot. There's constitutional amendments on the ballot this election cycle. There could be something very important to you on the ballot. Look at it, read it, and make the effort to cast a vote, even if it's only on one single issue.
Yeah,
so I am very passionate about voting. I think it's one of the most important rights that we have as Americans.
No issues. Yeah, now, I can't help it. I said that was your last word. But one last thing. You have kids who are, involved in this because obviously they have a mother who is very passionate about the situation with regard to voting. Now, if each kid were to tell another kid, to tell another kid, to tell another kid, would that be influential in making the difference?
I believe so. But 100%, I think, young adults and adolescents tend to want to go with the crowd, and that would be a good way to go with the crowd. It's to tell all your friends to get out and vote.
Yeah, maybe there should be, and this is how I'm going to finish. I'm thinking, what do young people like? What did they listen to? What did they do? Wouldn't it be interesting if there was a rap song about elections, about voting?
Yeah, or some kind of a catchy pop tune or something. Yeah,
that's right. I mean, it seems so, possible, and it seems so realistic. Maybe we'll get you to write a song.
I wish I had any talent in that area.
Sarah,
I don't think that's going to happen.
But there must be young people.
I'm
talk
sure,
to your kids and see whether your kids can influence some of the other kids. Love to sing rap and write rap songs and, get involved in the system. All right. It's lovely to finish on a note where we're laughing, because it's not a laughing matter. It is really an important matter, and I don't want to make jokes about it, but there is, it could work. It could work, and we just discovered something, having this discussion, that maybe that's the way to reach kids. So, on the note, I want to say thank you, Sara Alijewicz, for being on the Susan Brender Show, and we wish you a tremendous amount of luck in your position as judge, and we look forward to having you maybe speak again once you're in the office. So, again, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Susan. It was a pleasure. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too. Take care now.
Thank you for listening to The Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.